Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. I'm Braxton, 28 now, but this all started way back. I was the quiet kid, the one who actually gave a damn about school, kept to himself, didn't cause problems. I was the kind of kid who did his homework without being told, who stayed out of the way, who didn't ask for much. Then there was my brother, Alan. He's 3 years younger, 25 now, but back then, he was this loud, obnoxious, spoiled little gremlin who ran around the house like he owned the place. I'd be at the dining table, head down, working through math problems or studying for a test. Meanwhile, Alan would be tearing through the hallway with a towel tied around his neck, shouting, "I'm Super Alan. Out of my way, peasants." And Mom, she just laughed, like he was the funniest thing on earth. She treated him like he was some kind of precious artifact that needed to be handled with white gloves. I'm talking full service. She'd make his meals from scratch, pack his lunch just the way he liked it. No crusts, triangle cut, 2 types of cookies. His laundry, folded and put away in drawers she labeled for him. She even organized his school stuff like he was royalty preparing for battle. And the kicker? She'd ask me to help him with his homework. Not because I was the older brother and maybe had more experience. No, that wasn't the reason. According to her, it was just expected of me. "Braxton," she'd say, waving a worksheet at me while she stirred a pot on the stove. "Can you help Alan with his math? He's struggling with long division. Can't he ask the teacher for help?" I'd mutter. She'd shoot me that look. "Don't be selfish. You know this stuff already, so it won't take you long." Meanwhile, Alan would be on the couch, lying flat like a Roman emperor, munching on chips and smirking. "Better not screw it up, genius," he'd say, tossing a pencil at me. And the worst part? Nobody ever asked him to return the favor. Ever. If I needed help with something, reaching something high, carrying a heavy box, even just basic stuff like figuring out a new app, he'd just shrug and walk away. "Can you help me with this?" I'd ask, pointing to the screen. He wouldn't even look up from his game. "Nah, I'm busy." But God forbid I didn't drop everything to help His Royal Highness with a math problem or find his lost socks or clean up his mess when guests were coming over. It was like my entire role in the family had been quietly defined as Alan's backup plan. I learned early that complaining about this setup was useless. Dad was always working, late hours, business trips, sometimes gone for weeks. And when he was home, Alan would flip the switch. Suddenly, he was this sweet, helpful little angel offering to carry in groceries or bring Dad his slippers. "See how good Alan's being?" Mom would say, as if reading from a script. "You could learn something from your little brother." I just stared at her, stunned. I was the one cleaning my own room, making my own meals half the time, and getting straight A's. But none of that mattered. She'd already made up her mind. So I figured fine, I'll just handle my own stuff. I was independent anyway. Big mistake. Alan took that as a green light to treat me like his personal servant for the next decade. "Hey, Brax," he'd shout from the bathroom. "I'm out of toilet paper. Bring me a roll." Or worse, "Yo, you're doing laundry? Throw my stuff in too." He never learned basic empathy, never learned how to work for anything. Why would he? Everything was handed to him on a silver platter while I was over here learning life lessons the hard way. By the time we hit middle school, Alan had figured out that he could basically torture me with 0 consequences. And I'm not talking about typical sibling teasing. This was next-level psychological warfare, the kind that would make the CIA jealous. He'd sneak into my room when I wasn't around and go through my personal stuff. One day, he found my diary. Yeah, I kept one back then. Dumb move in hindsight. He read it cover to cover, every page. And then he ran straight to Mom with this smug grin and said, "Hey Mom, guess what Braxton wrote? He's got a crush on Melissa from math class, and he thinks his nose is too big." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Alan," I snapped, storming into the room. "That was private. You went through my stuff." He didn't even flinch, just leaned against the wall and smirked. "Maybe you shouldn't write such pathetic crap if you don't want people to laugh at it." Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. She looked over and chuckled. "Oh, come on, Brax. That's just how brothers are." I stared at her, waiting for her to tell him to apologize. She didn't, just turned back to her cooking like it was nothing. But it got worse. Way worse. School was its own kind of hell, and Alan knew exactly what buttons to push. He knew I was getting picked on. Some older kids like to mess with the quiet, nerdy kid. And instead of, I don't know, having my back like a decent human being, let alone a brother, he joined in. "Hey, isn't this the kid who cried when he got AB+?" One of the guys would laugh. And Alan, right on cue, would say, "Yeah," and he writes love poems to himself in his diary. He'd laugh with them, feed them ammunition, tell them stuff he'd overheard at home, just to make my life even more miserable. The names they used to call me still stick in my head. Ugly, loser, hairy monkey, all because of my glasses or the way I looked. You know how middle school kids can be, creative in the worst ways, every insult a dagger with a twist. But what hit the hardest wasn't coming from those kids. It was hearing my own brother laughing along, throwing his own jabs and like he was auditioning for the roast of the century. Yeah, he still sleeps with a nightlight, Alan would say, loud enough for everyone to hear. Or, he cries when he watches Disney movies. Like full-on sobbing. He knew those things because we lived in the same house. Because I trusted that I had at least some privacy in my own home. But nothing was off limits with him. Every insecurity, every little thing I hoped nobody would ever find out, he weaponized it. The breaking point came during one of our usual fights. I don't even remember what sparked it. Probably something dumb like me asking him not to take my stuff without asking. But it escalated fast like it always did. And then he just stood there, staring me down, and said, "You should kill yourself." Just like that. No hesitation. No drama in his voice. Just flat and mean like he meant it. I froze. My brain couldn't even process what I'd just heard. When I didn't respond right away, he doubled down. "Seriously, nobody would even miss you. You're just taking up space in this family." And the worst part? I was already dealing with some serious mental health stuff at the time. Feeling like an outsider in my own family. Getting picked on at school. Isolated as hell. And then my own brother says that to me. It's the kind of thing that burns itself into your memory, you know? I'll never forget the way he said it. Like I didn't even matter. Dad was basically MIA through most of it. Working late, traveling, too tired to deal with anything when he was home. Mom, she'd already decided that I was the problem child. That if I'd just stopped provoking Alan, everything would be fine. "Why do you two always have to fight?" She'd snap, like we were equally to blame. "You're older. Set a better example." She wasn't listening. She never really listened. But then there was the hair-burning incident. That was the moment everything finally cracked open, when even she couldn't pretend it was harmless anymore. Picture this. I'm sitting at my desk doing homework, headphones in, minding my own business. Alan walks up behind me with a lighter, just flicks it on like it's nothing, and leans in, actually trying to set my hair on fire. My hair. On fire. Not some dumb prank. Not just messing around. He was actually trying to light me up like a freaking candle. I freaked out, obviously. I jumped up, heart racing, and ran straight to Mom. "Alan just tried to set my hair on fire." I shouted. And she just stared at me like I was overreacting. "Oh, come on," she said, waving a hand. He was just playing around. Playing around. That's what she called it. But this time, Dad was home. He just walked in from work and heard the whole thing. Heard the panic in my voice. Saw the lighter in Alan's hand. And something just snapped. He lost it. Finally. "Enough is enough," he barked at Alan. "You need to start respecting your older brother." Just a few words. Nothing fancy. But to me, it felt like the validation I'd been waiting for my entire life. Like someone finally saw what was happening. Later that night, Dad pulled me aside. Just me and him in the garage. I thought I was about to get a lecture. Instead, he said, "I should have stepped in sooner." I didn't say anything. Just stared at the floor. "Alan's becoming a bully," he continued. "And none of this is your fault, Braxton. None of it." I looked up at him, and I swear it was like something out of Good Will Hunting. That scene where Robin Williams just keeps saying, "It's not your fault." Except this wasn't about childhood trauma in general. This was about years of psychological abuse from my own brother. I almost broke down right there in the garage, standing next to Dad. Someone had finally seen what was happening. Someone believed me. After all those years of feeling like I was shouting into the void, like I was the crazy one for reacting to actual abuse. Here was my father, the man who'd been absent most of the time, finally stepping in and saying, "It's not your fault." But he didn't just stop with words. The very next day, he marched into my school. No warning, just showed up during his lunch hour and asked to speak with the principal. I didn't know about it until after. He told them what had been happening, how kids were bullying me, how even my brother was feeding them information, and that the school had better do something about it. Suddenly, the guys who'd made my life hell were facing real consequences. Detentions. Calls home. One of them even got suspended for what he said to me in class. Then Dad enrolled me in MMA classes at the local gym. "You need to learn to stand up for yourself," he said. "Not just physically, Brax. Mentally too. I should have done this years ago." I laughed, dry and bitter. What's a scrawny kid like me gonna do in a gym full of cage fighters? "You'll learn," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Trust me." And so I walked into that gym feeling like Napoleon Dynamite with a backpack full of library books. Everyone else looked like they bench pressed cars for fun. I was the lanky kid in oversized glasses and a nervous smile. But here's the thing. I'd always been focused. I might have been quiet and awkward, but when I decided I wanted to learn something, I stuck with it. So I carved out time. Between homework, studying, and everything else, I made space for the gym. Every day, the transformation was slow, but it was real. 6 months later, I put on real muscle. I wasn't shredded or anything, but I could hold my own. More than that, I'd learned actual fighting techniques. My reflexes were faster. I knew how to control my breathing. And most importantly, I had confidence. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking around waiting for the next hit, verbal or otherwise. So when Alan pulled his usual stunt, stealing from me, it was different this time. I'd been saving up from doing chores, tutoring a couple neighborhood kids, even mowing lawns. Not a fortune, but it was mine. And Alan, being Alan, decided he'd help himself to it so he could go out with his idiot friends and blow it on who knows what. I caught him red-handed. He was halfway out the door, money in hand, laughing. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" I asked, stepping into the hallway. He looked me over like I was still the same pushover. "Relax, nerd. It's just some cash. You'll live." I stepped closer. "That's my money. I earned it." He rolled his eyes and smirked. "What are you gonna do, huh? Run to daddy again? Cry about it like the little bitch you are." That was it. I didn't even think. My right hand just moved. Clean, sharp, everything my coach taught me. Right hook. Landed square on his jaw. He went down like a sack of potatoes. No cinematic drama. No slow motion fall. Just bam. And he was on the floor, stunned. I reached into his pocket, took back my money, and stood over him. Calm. In control. For the first time in years, I had the power. The look on his face, shocked, scared, betrayed, was priceless. He couldn't believe his personal punching bag had finally grown some teeth. Alan started crying. Not from the punch, but from the fact that he'd lost. And even while he was crying, he kept shouting, "You psycho. I'm telling Mom. You attacked me for no reason." Mom came running from the kitchen, saw Alan on the floor, me standing there with my fists clenched, and immediately lost it. "What did you do to him?" she screamed, pushing me back. "You hit your brother?" Before I could even answer, Dad walked in from the garage. "He stole money from Braxton," I said. "He was walking out the door with it." "Is that true?" Dad asked Alan, voice like steel. Alan just sobbed louder, trying to avoid the question. Dad turned to me and said, calm but firm, "He's lucky you just punched him. Anyone else would have called the cops." That was it. No grounding. No lecture. Just validation. Again. From that point on, Alan kept his distance. He still muttered crap under his breath and tossed insults when no one else was around, but the dynamic had shifted. He knew he couldn't physically intimidate me anymore. I saw it in his eyes, that fear of someone he'd underestimated for years. The verbal abuse didn't stop, not completely, but now it felt different, more like the desperate whining of someone who'd lost their power. He tried to get under my skin, but it didn't work anymore. Because I knew who I was now, college became my escape route. I got accepted into my dream school on a full scholarship. And for the first time in my life, I felt genuinely proud of an achievement. Dad threw me a party when I got the scholarship. Nothing too big, just close friends and family, but it meant the world to me. He was proud, visibly proud, for the first time I could remember. Even Mom seemed genuinely happy, smiling, congratulating me like maybe, finally, I wasn't just the problem child in her eyes. And Alan? Alan sulked in the corner like someone had stolen his spotlight. "College won't fix your personality problems," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough that Mom wouldn't scold him. I just ignored him. I'd spent too many years letting his words sink in. Not anymore. That fall, I started college with a whole new outlook, away from home, away from all the old baggage. It was like stepping into a clean slate. And during sophomore year, I met Josephine at a frat party I'd almost skipped. Not really my scene, but a friend dragged me along, and there she was. She was standing near the drink table, looking just as unimpressed as I felt. Somehow, we ended up talking, and we didn't stop. She was smart, funny, and really listened. Not the polite kind of listening people fake while waiting to talk, but the real kind, where her eyes stayed on you, and her face actually reacted. Do you ever feel like you're the only one at these things who isn't pretending to be someone else? I asked at one point. She grinned. Every single time. It's like watching a costume party where everyone forgot what they're supposed to be. We clicked. Instantly. Josephine came from a good family, tight-knit, loving, religious, but not overbearing. She was the first person I'd ever dated who made me feel like I could breathe. No eggshells. No second-guessing every interaction. With her, I didn't feel like I had to earn kindness. It was just there. We started dating seriously not long after that night, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had something that was completely mine, separate from all the dysfunction I'd grown up with. Josephine was my fresh start, my chance to build something normal, something good. Her family had strong beliefs, especially about sex before marriage, but we were young, in love, and one night during our senior year, things got carried away. She got pregnant. It was a shock, sure, but it didn't feel like a disaster. We loved each other. We had already talked about a future together. So we made the decision to get married right after graduation. Looking back now, yeah, maybe we rushed into it. We were barely out of college, just starting our adult lives, but at the time it felt right. Like we were doing what we were supposed to. No big wedding, just something small and meaningful. Both families showed up, and everyone seemed happy for us. At least on the surface. I stood there at the altar, looking at Josephine, and I genuinely believed she was it. My person. She was everything I'd ever wanted, loyal, supportive, kind. Someone who could help me build the kind of family I never had growing up. I had this whole mentality that I was going to be a one-woman man. You know, like in those old black and white movies where the guy finds his girl, and that's it. No wandering. No curiosity. Just home. Even over the years, when other women would flirt or show interest, I never entertained it. Not once. I didn't feel the need to. I was happy. Content. We had our routines down perfectly. I'd get up early for work. Josephine would handle getting our son Leo ready for school, and we'd meet back in the evening for dinner and family time. Saturdays were for zoo trips or grocery runs that turned into family outings. Sundays were church and cartoons on the couch. It was predictable, stable, everything I thought I wanted. But looking back now, there were signs. Little things I ignored or told myself were normal. Josephine started having these moments where she'd just zone out. I'd be in the middle of telling her about something that happened at work or asking her about her day, and she'd get this look on her face. Like she wasn't there. Like her mind was somewhere else entirely. When I'd ask if she was okay, Josephine would sort of blink and come back to the moment, like she'd been 1,000 miles away. Huh? Yeah, I'm fine, she'd say, brushing a hand through her hair. Just tired. Work's been brutal lately. And I believed her. Of course I did. She had a demanding job. We had a kid. We were adults now. Tired was just part of the deal, right? But then there was her phone. She used to be so casual with it, leaving it on the counter or coffee table, unlocked half the time. But at some point, that changed. Suddenly, she was carrying it with her everywhere. Bathroom, laundry room, even just to grab the mail. One night, as a joke, I said, "What, you got state secrets on there or something?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she gave me this tight smile. Wow, paranoid much? I was kidding, I said, holding my hands up. Relax. She shook her head, already walking away. It's sad that you think I'm hiding something just because I don't leave my phone out like bait. I dropped it. I didn't want to start a fight. But moments like that kept stacking up. Little things. The coldness came slowly. Subtly. Like when I'd reach out to hold her hand while we were watching TV. She wouldn't pull away, exactly, but there was no warmth in her grip. Or when I'd come up behind her in the kitchen and wrap my arms around her waist, she'd keep chopping vegetables like I wasn't even there. She didn't flinch. She didn't lean in either. Just kept going, like my affection was background noise. Our sex life took a nosedive too. At first, it was the usual stuff. Long days, Leo's sleep schedule, headaches. Life was busy. I got it. But then it became a pattern. A wall. Every time I reached out, there was a reason why it couldn't happen. Too tired. Too stressed. Not feeling great. And again, I brushed it off. I told myself it was normal. Everyone says the passion fades after a few years of marriage and having a kid, right? It's part of the package. So I rationalized it. Made peace with it. Or tried to. Then she started working late more often. Big project, she'd say, grabbing her bag on a Tuesday evening. The client's a nightmare. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Josephine had always been ambitious. That was one of the things I respected most about her. She cared about her work. So I didn't question it. I picked up the slack at home. Helped Leo with his homework. Got him ready for bed. Made dinner. It wasn't a burden. He's my son. I loved that time with him. But the weirdest thing, what still makes my stomach twist, was how she started acting at family gatherings. Josephine used to be relaxed around my family. Joked with my dad. Made conversation with mom. But lately, she seemed jumpy. Distracted. I'd catch her having these weirdly intense conversations with Alan. Alan, of all people. They'd be standing close, whispering, and as soon as I walked over, they'd break apart like they'd been caught doing something wrong. What were you guys talking about? I asked once, casually, while grabbing a drink from the fridge. Josephine didn't miss a beat. Oh, just catching up. He was asking about work stuff. Alan, leaning against the counter, nodded. Yeah, just boring adult stuff. I remember thinking, wow, maybe they're finally getting along. Maybe she's trying to help fix things between us. It almost made me feel hopeful. Like maybe she was being the bridge. God knows I never thought Alan would be friendly to anyone I cared about. But there he was, cracking jokes and complimenting her cooking like he belonged in a Hallmark movie. I told myself he'd matured. That he was finally growing up and trying to be a better brother. What a joke. Looking back now, I see it clearly. He was being his usual manipulative self, turning on the charm when it suited him, playing the part. And I, like an idiot, fell for it. But at the time, none of it set off alarms. Josephine had never given me a reason not to trust her. Not once. So I told myself it was all just normal stuff. The phone, the distance, the excuses, the weirdness with Alan. All of it. I chalked up to work stress, getting older, and the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. I was so focused on being the good husband, the dependable father, the rock that held everything together, that I never stopped to consider what might really be going on beneath the surface. I kept my head down, stayed busy, told myself everything was fine. Because sometimes, deep down, I think part of me didn't want to see the signs. Because seeing them, acknowledging them, that would have meant dealing with a reality I wasn't prepared for. It's easier to live in denial when the truth threatens to shatter the entire world you've built. Easier to pretend it's just stress, just a phase, just life. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. I got a call from my cousin Maya. We'd always been close growing up, family dinners, sleepovers, those ridiculous talent shows at Grandma's house. But adulthood had pulled us in different directions. These days, we mostly saw each other at weddings, baby showers, or the occasional holiday get-together. So when she called and asked to meet for lunch, said she needed to talk about something important, I assumed it was just family logistics. Probably planning someone's surprise party. I mumbled to myself as I drove to the little diner downtown. No big deal. But the second I walked in and saw her sitting there, something in my chest tightened. Maya looked off, uncomfortable. Her hands kept fidgeting with her coffee cup, spinning it back and forth. She wasn't making eye contact. This wasn't the same confident, outspoken cousin I remembered. "Hey," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Everything okay?" She didn't answer right away, just stared down into her cup like it might have answers written in the foam. "I need to tell you something," she finally said, her voice low and shaky. Then she stopped, took a deep breath. "And I really don't know how to say this." My stomach dropped. In my experience, conversations that start like that never end well. It's like hearing the creak of a floorboard right before the ceiling caves in. She looked up, and for a split second, I saw guilt in her eyes. That was all it took for the panic to kick in. "It's about Josephine and Alan," she said softly. Just hearing their names together like that, linked in the same sentence, made my blood run cold. My throat felt dry. "What about them?" Maya looked around like she wanted to make sure no one was close enough to hear. Then she leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "At the last family barbecue. You remember, right? You were helping Uncle Robert with the grill, and Leo was dragging you around to show you his stick collection or something?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, what about it?" "I went inside to use the bathroom," she said, "and I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Loud ones." She hesitated, biting her lip. It was Josephine and Alan. My jaw clenched. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," she added quickly, like she needed me to understand. "But they were being pretty loud. And then, I heard Josephine say something." I didn't breathe. "What did she say?" I asked, voice low. Maya's eyes finally met mine, filled with something like fear. She said, "You said it would just be one time." The words that came out of Maya's mouth next felt like a physical punch to the gut. "What if he's yours? What if they find out?" That's what Maya said she heard. She repeated it to me there in that diner, voice shaking, eyes wide like she still couldn't believe it herself. She said Josephine sounded panicked, almost hysterical, and Alan was trying to calm her down, telling her to lower her voice, saying nobody would ever know. The conversation had ended abruptly when someone else came into the kitchen. Maya said she slipped out and pretended she hadn't heard a thing, heart pounding in her ears. "I've been wrestling with whether to tell you for weeks," she said, voice cracking. "But I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet, and you never found out." I just sat there, frozen. The words echoed again and again in my mind. What if he's yours? There was only one possible interpretation, and it was the one scenario that had never crossed my mind, not even in my worst, most paranoid nightmares. My wife, my brother, my son. I think Maya. I probably sounded calm, maybe even cold, but inside, I was completely coming undone. My hands were shaking under the table, and my stomach was in knots. I drove home in a daze. I couldn't remember half the trip, like I was on autopilot, trying to process the information without fully letting it in. Because if I did, if I let myself really believe it, everything would break. That night, I started paying attention, really paying attention. All the things I'd brushed off before came rushing back with horrifying clarity. The way Josephine and Alan would glance at each other during family gatherings, quick, loaded glances. The way they'd always stop talking when I walked into a room. The way Josephine's voice would change, slightly brighter, slightly more animated, when Alan's name came up. How he'd always been unusually warm toward her right from the beginning. when he'd never shown that side of himself to anyone I cared about before. I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did what I never thought I'd have to do. I became a detective in my own life. I checked her phone records, cross-referenced dates and times, looked through credit card statements, bank transactions, travel histories, social media tags, anything that might tell me the truth. And once I knew what to look for, the evidence was everywhere. Hotel charges on days she'd claimed to be stuck at work, text messages between them that had been deleted but still showed up in the call logs, business trips that coincided with Alan suddenly being unavailable when I tried to reach him. The overlap was unmistakable. They hadn't just been sneaking around for a few weeks or months. This had been going on for years. While I was busy playing the devoted husband and father, packing lunches, helping with homework, celebrating anniversaries, they were living a double life behind my back. My wife, my own brother. I could have lost my mind, but I didn't. Within 1 week of Maya's revelation, I went into full-on strategic mode. This wasn't going to be some soap opera-style emotional explosion where I shouted accusations and stormed out. No, I'd already been blindsided once. I wasn't going to let it happen again. I was going to protect myself, protect Leo, and make sure I didn't get screwed over. Well, any more than I already had. First stop? Mike's office. My best friend since high school. He'd gone into family law, always half joking that if I ever needed legal help, he was just a call away. I never thought I'd actually take him up on it. Mike didn't sugarcoat anything. The moment I laid it all out, everything Maya had told me, everything I'd uncovered, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "You're going to need someone ruthless." He recommended a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces. A guy with a reputation for protecting Father's rights and not getting steamrolled by sob stories and courtroom theatrics. Within 48 hours, I had a meeting scheduled. The lawyer, Mr. Hawthorne, was no nonsense, sharp as hell. He walked me through the steps like he'd done it 1,000 times, which he probably had. His confidence was steadying. "The first thing we do," he said, "is file for a paternity test through the court. Legally binding. Admissible. Once that's in motion, you document everything." So that's what I did. I started compiling every piece of evidence I had. Screenshots, copies of credit card statements, a detailed timeline showing every business trip of hers that lined up with Alan's disappearances. I created spreadsheets, organized files, labeled dates. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was building a case against a stranger. But it wasn't a stranger. It was my wife, my brother. Next step, protecting my assets. I opened a separate bank account in just my name and began slowly transferring money out of our joint account. Not enough to raise flags, but enough that I wouldn't be left with nothing if she decided to clean me out. I canceled the shared credit cards, had my name removed from anything she could tie to, changed all my personal account passwords, every one of them, started keeping physical copies of important documents, birth certificates, insurance info, property deeds, at Mike's office, locked up tight. By the end of the week, the divorce papers were filed. Since we lived in an at-fault state, Josephine's adultery wasn't just morally repugnant, it was legally powerful. Her affair with Alan wasn't a minor detail. It would directly influence property division and the custody battle. Mr. Hawthorne was confident. "If Leo is yours biologically, we go for full custody. You keep the house, the assets, everything. Judges don't look kindly on infidelity involving immediate family. This is about as bad as it gets." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything. Just focused. Like I was operating on autopilot. Only when every legal and financial angle had been secured did I finally decide to confront Josephine directly. I waited until Friday evening. Leo was at a sleepover with one of his classmates, which meant we'd be alone. No distractions. No kid in the middle. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a blanket, scrolling through her phone like it was just another night. I stood in the hallway for a second, just watching her. This woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with, before stepping in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and flat, carrying the weight of everything I'd been holding in. She looked up immediately. Her eyes met mine, and I saw it, the shift, the tension in her shoulders, that flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew. She didn't know how much, but she knew enough to realize this wasn't just a normal conversation. I walked over, set the folder on the coffee table, and opened it slowly. Inside, phone records showing late-night calls and deleted texts between her and Alan. Credit card statements with hotel charges from dates she told me she was working late. Screenshots. Travel itineraries. It wasn't speculation. It wasn't paranoia. It was evidence. She leaned forward, scanned the pages, her eyes darting from line to line. Her expression started shifting. First confusion, then that knee-jerk denial, followed by the crackling edge of panic. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. And finally, resignation. Because she realized the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. I can explain, she started, but her voice was already cracking. Go ahead, I said, sitting back in the armchair and crossing my arms. Explain how you've been screwing my brother behind my back for years. The bluntness of it seemed to hit her like a slap. Her face crumpled almost instantly, and she started crying, full-on sobbing into her hands like she was the one who'd been betrayed. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said through the tears. Alan and I, we just connected on a level that you and I never did. He actually listens to me, pays attention to me, makes me feel like I matter. I stayed silent. I could feel my jaw tightening, but I kept it locked, waiting. I knew there was more. There was always more. You're always working late, she continued. Always focused on your career, or your hobbies, or whatever project you're obsessing over. When was the last time you asked me how my day really went? When was the last time you planned a surprise for me, or took me somewhere special just because? That was the moment I realized she was going to do it. She was going to try and spin this, twist it into my fault. So, because I work hard to provide for our family, I said, slowly and evenly. You decided to cheat with my brother? It's not that simple, she snapped, and her whole tone shifted. Less crying, more fire. You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage. Alan makes me feel alive, makes me feel beautiful and wanted. With you, I feel like just another item on your to-do list. I stared at her, barely blinking. What did I do wrong, Josephine? Really? Spell it out for me. She got quiet. For a moment, I thought maybe she was done, that the weight of it was finally sinking in. But then I said it. You've been lying to me for years. About possibly raising another man's child. My brother's child. And I've been going to work every day, saving for Leo's college, thinking I'm building a life with a woman who actually gives a damn. So tell me, what did I do to deserve that? And that's when she completely went off the rails. Don't you dare judge me, she screamed, jumping up from the couch and pointing a shaking finger at me. You think you're this perfect husband, but you're not. You're cold. You're distant. She was building momentum now, years of resentment bubbling to the surface like lava. Alan remembers little things about me that you forgot years ago. He makes me laugh. He treats me like a woman instead of. Then why marry me? I shot back, standing now, my voice rising despite myself. Why waste years of my life, our lives, money I worked hard for, just so you could cheat? Why make me trust you? Why make me think we were building something real, a family, when it was all a lie? For what? For a deadbeat who can't even pay his own damn bills. She didn't flinch. Instead, she doubled down. You want to know the truth? Yeah. Yes. Partly. Yes, it's your fault, she shouted, eyes blazing. If you had been the husband I needed, I never would have looked elsewhere. If you had paid attention, if you had seen how unhappy I was, maybe we could have fixed it. Maybe we could have worked on it. She was unraveling, getting more hysterical by the minute. I stayed with you because I thought maybe you'd change, Josephine said, her voice cracking as she paced the room. Maybe you'd finally start acting like you actually wanted to be married to me. She actually believed it. Believed that I was the reason she'd cheated, that years of sneaking around behind my back, sleeping with my own brother, could somehow be justified because I wasn't attentive enough. It was unbelievable. I let her finish. I didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just waited for her to burn herself out. Then, without saying a word, I reached into the folder I'd brought and pulled out the divorce papers. I laid them calmly on the coffee table in front of her. Well, I said, voice steady, you don't have to worry about any of that anymore. Josephine stared at the documents like she didn't understand what she was looking at. Her eyes scanned the header, and her face went completely white. What is this? She asked, barely above a whisper. Divorce papers, I said. You've been served. And just like that, reality finally hit her. This wasn't some dramatic argument that ended in tears and forgiveness. This wasn't a test to see how far I could be pushed. This was final. She wasn't in control anymore. I was. You can't be serious, she said, voice trembling. You're just going to throw away our entire marriage over a mistake? I laughed bitterly. Funny how you're calling it a mistake. I stood, looking down at her. You don't even know if our son is actually mine. That's not a mistake, Josephine. That's a complete betrayal of everything our marriage was supposed to represent. Her expression shifted again, panic giving way to desperation. She tried one more card. One more attempt to pull on whatever thread of guilt she thought might be left. What about Leo? She said, eyes welling with tears. I stared at her, heart hammering but face unreadable. Leo is not my problem anymore, I said. The paternity test will determine who his real father is, and that person can take responsibility for him. That broke her. She completely lost it, screaming, crying, calling me heartless, telling me I was abandoning my responsibilities, that I'd regret this decision for the rest of my life. But I didn't care. I was already at the door, grabbing my keys, walking out into the night. Behind me, I could hear her spiraling, throwing things, maybe, wailing like the victim in a tragedy she created. But for the first time in months, I felt completely calm, in control, like I could finally breathe. And I wasn't done. Next stop, Mom and Dad's house. They were in the living room having coffee when I walked in. Looked surprised to see me at that hour, but they didn't ask questions. I sat down across from them, looked them both in the eyes, and told them everything. The affair, the lies, the possibility that Leo wasn't even mine. The shock was immediate. Dad looked stunned, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing, but Mom's reaction was exactly what I expected. That can't be true, she said, shaking her head. Alan would never do something like that. Not to his own brother. Even with the truth right in front of her, even after everything, she still tried to protect him. Still tried to pretend her golden boy couldn't possibly be capable of something so disgusting. But I'd come prepared. Don't say anything, I said, reaching for my phone. Just listen. I pulled up Alan's contact and hit the call button. Then I put the phone on speaker right there in front of them. When he answered, I didn't waste a second. I know about you and Josephine, I said flatly. She confessed everything. There was a pause, brief, calculated, before Alan slipped into that same smug tone he'd always used when he thought he could outmaneuver me. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. And frankly, I don't appreciate being accused of something I didn't do. But I came prepared. I started laying out specifics. Dates, times, hotel names, credit card charges, even details about the family barbecue where Maya overheard them. I could hear the gears grinding in his head, trying to figure out how much I knew, where the holes in his lies were. That's when the facade cracked, and his true self, the one I'd known my whole life, came out swinging. Look, he said, and I could practically hear the smirk in his voice. It's not my fault if women prefer me over you. I glanced at my parents. Mom's hand was frozen around her coffee mug. Dad's jaw clenched so hard I thought he might break his teeth. I mean, come on, Alan continued, voice full of that familiar condescension. I'm better looking, more fun to be around, and I actually know how to satisfy a woman. Maybe if you weren't such a boring, uptight little bitch, your wife wouldn't have needed to find excitement elsewhere. The room went dead silent. Mom's face drained of all color. Dad looked like he was ready to drive over to Alan's place and strangle him with his own tie. And Alan just kept going. She came on to me, by the way, he said, like he was proud of it. Kept telling me how miserable she was with you. How she wished she'd met me first. I was just being a good brother-in-law, you know? Giving her the attention her husband was too pathetic to provide. I didn't blink. I'm going to expose you to everyone, I said. Let's see how golden you are then. He laughed. Actually laughed. Nobody's gonna believe you, he said. I'm the golden child, remember? And that's when I dropped the hammer. Thanks for confirming everything. Bro, Mom and Dad heard every word of this conversation. The silence on the other end of the line was immediate. Deafening. Like someone had hit a mute button on his ego. Then the backpedaling started. Wait. Hold on. That's not what I meant. Braxton, come on. You're twisting my words. But it was too late. His mask had shattered. My parents had just witnessed the real Alan. Dad took the phone from me, his hands shaking, not with fear, but with rage. Years of disappointment and buried frustration finally boiling to the surface. What you've done, Dad said, his voice low and trembling with fury, isn't just a betrayal of your brother. It's a betrayal of this entire family. He paused, letting the weight of that land like a sledgehammer. I raised both of you to value family, loyalty, decency. What you've shown today goes against everything I tried to instill in you. The disregard for your brother's feelings. The complete absence of remorse. It's unacceptable. Then Dad drew a sharp breath and dropped the financial bombshell. Starting today, I'm cutting you off. You can figure out your own university fees. I won't be funding your lifestyle anymore. His voice hardened. You think being a selfish, destructive person makes you superior? Let's see how you handle it when you don't have my money to depend on. Alan tried to protest, his voice rising, aggressive, entitled, furious. This is bullshit, he yelled through the phone. You can't punish me for something that's between me and him. And you can't cut me off. I'm your son too. But Dad didn't even dignify it with a response. He just hung up. 3 hours later, I was back home at the kitchen table, going over divorce paperwork. Josephine had locked herself in the bedroom and was still sobbing, but I'd stopped caring. She could cry all night for all I cared. It wasn't going to change a damn thing. Then my security system pinged. Front door, motion detected. I checked the camera feed and my stomach dropped. Alan. He looked completely unhinged, pacing like a caged animal, hands clenched at his sides, muttering to himself. I almost didn't open the door. Part of me thought, let him stew out there, but another part of me, one I couldn't fully explain, knew this confrontation was inevitable. Better now than later. I opened the door, and he exploded. "You piece of shit," he screamed, getting right in my face. "You ruined everything. Mom and Dad cut me off because of your little tantrum. You couldn't just handle this like a man, could you? You had to go crying to Mommy and Daddy like the pathetic loser you've always been." I said nothing. I just stood there, jaw locked, fists clenched, trying to keep it together. But he kept going, and it got worse. "Josephine never loved you. You know that, right? She told me you were boring in bed, that you had no idea how to make her happy. She only stayed with you because you were the safe choice, the reliable provider. She did things with me she never did with you." The words were like knives, each one aimed precisely where he knew it would hurt the most. He knew what he was doing, and it was working. But what pushed me over the edge wasn't what he said about Josephine. It was what he said next. "And that kid you've been raising?" His lips curled into a vicious sneer. "Imagine your son calling you daddy while his real father has been screwing his mom for years. How does that feel, huh? You pathetic cuck." Something inside me broke. I don't even remember making the decision to hit him. One second he was standing there, spitting poison, and the next, my fist collided with his face, full force. He stumbled back, blood immediately streaming from his nose. But he didn't back down. "You're dead," he screamed, charging at me like some rabid animal. "I'm going to kill you." He came in swinging, wild and furious, but clumsy as hell. That was the difference between us. He was rage, I was trained. I slipped under his first swing, pivoted, and drove a punch straight into his jaw. He staggered. Another shot, this one to the ribs, cracked against him, and he crumpled onto the front porch, blood pouring from his nose and mouth, gasping and groaning like a wounded animal. And then he looked up at me, eyes filled with nothing but raw, undiluted hatred. "You're going to pay for this," Alan wheezed from the porch, still bleeding. "I'm calling the cops. You assaulted me for no reason. Mom and Dad will have to choose between their violent son who attacks family members and their other son who made a mistake with his sister-in-law." Even now, beaten and humiliated, he was still trying to spin the narrative, still trying to paint himself as the misunderstood victim. I didn't say a word. I just walked over, grabbed him by the arm, and hauled him to his feet. "Get off my property," I said flatly. He stumbled toward his car, trailing blood down the driveway, still barking threats over his shoulder. "You think this is over? I'm pressing charges. I'll ruin you." 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. The police. Apparently Alan had followed through, filed an official report claiming I'd attacked him unprovoked, said I'd lost control and assaulted him for no reason, that he had feared for his life. The officers said they just needed to hear my side of the story. That's when I smiled, because I'd come prepared. "Give me a second," I said, walking over to my laptop. I pulled up the security camera footage from my front porch, one of the best investments I'd ever made. I queued up the video. Alan pacing, shouting, screaming obscenities, getting in my face, and then charging me with fists flying. Then me, defending myself with controlled, restrained force. No excessive violence, just enough to stop the attack. I watched the officers' faces as they viewed it. The tone shifted instantly. The younger cop leaned back and gave a low whistle. "Yeah," he said, "that's a clear case of self-defense. Guy came to your property to pick a fight." The other one added, "You did what anyone would have done." They closed the report right there. Alan's bogus complaint? Dead in the water. That was the final nail in his coffin. He'd already lost our parents' support, already burned every bridge. And now he'd embarrassed himself in front of law enforcement and proven to everyone, including Mom, exactly who he was. She called me that evening, crying. "I'm so sorry, Braxton," she said, "for everything, for enabling him all these years. I never saw it before. But after today, after the way he showed up at your house, the things he said, I realized I created a monster." Her voice cracked. "And now he's living alone in my house, angry, broke, and blaming the world." After the divorce was finalized, it felt surreal. I'd gone straight from my parents' house to living with Josephine. I'd never had the chance to just be, to live alone, build my own space, exist without someone else's emotional chaos dictating the temperature of every day. And you know what? I loved it. No more wondering why my partner was acting weird. No more decoding passive-aggressive silences. No more pretending I didn't see the looks Josephine and Alan exchanged at family gatherings. Just peace, solitude, and for the first time in my life, freedom to build exactly the kind of world I wanted. I redecorated the house, stripped it of every reminder of them, got rid of the joint furniture, the framed photos, even the throw pillows Josephine had obsessed over. This was my space now. Work became my sanctuary. With the emotional weight lifted, I was sharper, more focused. Colleagues noticed. My boss noticed. I was performing at a level I hadn't reached in years. The divorce only took 4 months, which, in legal terms, is lightning fast. Having solid evidence of the affair, documented proof of Alan's threats and aggression, and living in an at-fault state gave me a significant edge. Josephine tried to fight for the house, for alimony, for primary custody, but her position was weak, and her lawyer knew it. The paternity test results came back exactly as I'd suspected. Alan was Leo's biological father. Even though I'd been bracing for that answer, even though I'd played out the scenario in my head 1,000 times, it still hit me like a freight train. I remember just staring at the paper, numb, the words swimming in front of my eyes. Alan, my own brother, the same bastard who had tormented me since childhood. That smug, selfish coward was Leo's real father. It felt like losing a child while gaining a lifelong scar, a constant, living reminder of betrayal. I had loved Leo. I still loved him, in some twisted, painful way. I'd been there when he took his first steps. I taught him how to ride a bike. I was the one who stayed up with him during fevers, the one who read him stories at night and packed his lunch for school. I wasn't just a father figure. I was his dad. But none of that changed the truth stamped on that DNA report. So, I gave up being his father. It may hurt now, but in the long run, better for both me and Leo. Josephine, of course, tried to weaponize it in court, said I should continue being part of Leo's life. Her whole pitch was that he shouldn't be punished for the mistakes of the adults. But I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at him, all I could see was Alan's smirk. His eyes. His features. The way he tilted his head when he was confused, it was his. And it made me feel physically sick. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe it makes me cruel. But after everything they did, I couldn't keep living with that ghost in my house, haunting every room, every memory. I needed a clean break to move forward. In the end, I got to keep the house, most of our shared assets, and, more importantly, my dignity. Josephine, she moved in with Alan. I didn't ask questions about how that arrangement worked, and I honestly didn't care. I just imagined the look on her face the first time she realized she wasn't living with the charming rebel she'd idolized, but a man who couldn't cook, couldn't clean, and had never taken care of anyone but himself. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from Dad. He sounded calm, steady, like always, but there was a weight to his voice that told me something important was coming. I've been thinking a lot about my will, he said. I didn't say anything, just waited. After what Alan did to you, what he did to this family, I can't justify leaving him anything significant. My chest tightened. Dad's not the type to make idle threats. If he says something, especially something this serious, he means it. He continued, I'm changing everything over to you. The house, all the investments, retirement accounts, life insurance. It's about $1 million total. I blinked. Wait, what? You heard me, he said. Alan will get exactly $100. Just enough so he can't legally contest the will later. I couldn't even respond right away. $1 million. That was more money than I'd ever dreamed of having access to. And hearing Dad say it, he wasn't doing this out of pity. This was his way of restoring balance, of setting things right after a lifetime of favoritism that Alan had weaponized. There's one condition, Dad added. If I pass away before your mother, she keeps the house, even though technically you'll own it. Obviously, I said. Of course. I agree. I want to take care of her no matter what. That wasn't even a question. After everything, Mom had finally seen the truth, and whatever time she had left, I was going to make sure it was peaceful and secure. But the best part? The absolute cherry on top? Alan found out about the will change, and he was losing his mind over it. Yesterday, he called me for the first time since the police incident. The moment I saw his name pop up on my phone, I almost declined. But something told me this was going to be worth hearing. Look, he started, trying to sound calm and reasonable. I know we've had our differences. His voice cracked slightly, like he knew I wasn't buying it. But I'm really struggling financially here. College is expensive, Josephine is demanding child support for Leo, and I can't find decent work anywhere. Maybe you could, I don't know, talk to Mom and Dad about giving me another chance. I stared at the phone in disbelief for a second. Then I started laughing. Not a chuckle, full-on laughter. I couldn't help it. The desperation, the hypocrisy, the absolute lack of self-awareness. It was like watching a bad actor stumble through an apology script he didn't believe in. Families should stick together, right? He added, trying to sound earnest. I repeated it back, still laughing. Families should stick together? Then I let the sarcasm settle in. That's rich, coming from the guy who stuck with my wife instead. Come on, man, he said, and now he was getting whiny, desperate. Josephine was just as much to blame as I was. You can't hold this against me forever. I made a mistake, but I'm still your brother. You're right, I said, voice flat. Josephine was equally to blame. That's why I divorced her. And now she's your problem to deal with, not mine. I let that hang in the air for a second, just long enough for the weight to land. You wanted her so badly? I added. Congratulations. You got her, along with all the responsibilities that come with her. That's when Alan's tone shifted. The mask slipped, as it always did. He started getting aggressive, raising his voice, trying to bully his way back into control. That same pathetic tactic he'd used his whole life. But I wasn't that kid anymore. Let me make something very clear, I said, cutting him off. You're no longer the golden child in this family. You're the guy who betrayed his own brother, attacked him at his own home, then tried to file a false police report. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. I paused, then gave him the final blow. We're done. Don't call me again. And then, for the first time in our entire lives, I heard my brother cry. Not fake tears. Not crocodile manipulation. Real tears. Real desperation. Real consequences. For once, he couldn't charm his way out of the mess he'd created. For once, he was completely, totally alone. And honestly, it felt good. The golden child, who'd spent his entire life getting everything handed to him, was now face to face with reality. No safety net. No bailouts. No family lifeline. He dropped out of college when he couldn't afford tuition. Alan was working part-time construction now. Nothing glamorous, just manual labor that left him too exhausted to complain, but not nearly enough to cover everything on his plate. He was living with Josephine, trying to figure out how to afford child support for a kid he never actually planned to raise. And meanwhile, my life was finally starting to feel like mine. My relationship with my parents had never been better. Dad and I go golfing every weekend now. Just the two of us. Laughing, trash-talking our swings, talking about real stuff. Not the surface-level stuff we used to scrape together at the dinner table when Alan was around soaking up all the oxygen. Now, it's real conversations, business, life goals, even future investments. Things I'd always wanted to talk about with him, but never could because everything used to be about putting out Alan's latest dumpster fire. And Mom, she took longer to come around. I won't lie, it hurt, how long it took her to fully see what was in front of her. But she's here now. She stopped defending him, stopped trying to play both sides. She doesn't bring him up anymore, and when extended family ask about him, she just says, Alan's figuring things out, and then changes the subject like she's flipping a light switch. A part of me still aches when I think about how blind she used to be, but I'm learning to let it go. We have dinner every other Sunday now. Just her, Dad, and me. And for the first time ever, it actually feels like a family meal instead of an emotional landmine. 2 months ago, I got promoted at work. Big one. Came with a hefty salary bump and some real respect from higher-ups. My boss sat me down and said, Braxton, I don't know what changed in your personal life, but you're locked in now. Sharper, more present, more decisive. I smiled. Divorce, I told him. And peace of mind. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. I'm not dating anyone yet. Not looking either. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy being alone. No secrets hiding under the surface. No gaslighting. No pretending everything's fine while my world quietly burns down behind me. And the best part? The absolute best part? Watching karma do what karma does best. Josephine and Alan got exactly what they wanted, each other. But not the fairy tale version they had in their heads. They got the reality. Two selfish people stuck together in a life built on betrayal. No house. No trust fund. No support system. Just two cheaters trying to stretch one paycheck and dodge accountability. And me? I got my freedom. My peace. My family back. My self-worth. Proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually do win in the end. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.